Well, Speaker McCarthy now faces his first test as early as in just a couple of hours if he can get the Republican caucus to align on a rules package. Now, this essentially are the rules of the road, the guiding principles that will allow for Congress to operate. And quite frankly, he can only lose 4 votes. And if the past couple of days are any indication, it's been a rough start for Speaker McCarthy in keeping the Republican caucus in line. But there's been a fascinating division that's emerged within the ranks of Republicans. You have far-right conservatives led by the likes of people like Congressman Matt Gaetz, and then other more center-right conservatives like Congresswoman Nancy Mace, a rising Republican star who has come out and said that she would vote against the rules package. She's undecided if it includes cuts to defense spending. So more moderate Republicans are really increasingly concerned about the deal that Speaker McCarthy made with right-wingers in order to get the gavel. And it could have long-lasting implications well into this summer and early fall once the U.S. has to raise the debt ceiling. Remember, ultra-conservatives have been pushing for quite some time that there be cut to entitlements, as well as cuts to some government funding agencies like the IRS. And that could lead to a very volatile couple of months in Washington, D.C., especially around the timing of the debt ceiling.
Speaking of volatile, there's also the relationship between President Biden and Republicans, I guess. I was just talking about President Biden's first trip to the U.S. Mexico border, the confrontation between he and Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Talk to us more about that meeting and sort of the implications as well.
Well, Julie, border security and border control, and as well as the spread of fentanyl across the United States, are just some of the agenda items for President Biden as he meets with Mexico's president. And in addition to that, he's also going to be joined by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Now, the three global leaders are going to talk about, in addition to drug enforcement, in addition to immigration issues, also access to credit in some of the export credit agencies and international development agencies that Mexico would like to see. Remember, the United States, Mexico, and Canada have had a pretty interesting go of trade negotiations in the last couple of years. But when you start talking about energy and electric vehicles and where parts are manufactured, these three nations they're not on the same page as it relates to trade. And then the last point about President Biden's trip is that it's not happening in Mexico, but what the events in Brazil have really added a new level of dynamics to President Biden's visit, because this is very much reminiscent of what happened on January 6th. Vice President Kamala Harris will be swearing in the new Brazilian ambassador later this week. It's expected that the administration will continue to speak out against what happened in Brazil, but look to see if any Republicans on Capitol Hill also denounce that denounce that violence as well.
And Kevin, while we have you more in international relations, Japanese delegation visiting the White House at the end of the week. What do we know?
Well, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida is going to be meeting with President Biden at the end of this week once the president returns back to Washington, D.C. It comes as the new Japanese Prime Minister has traveled to other countries in Europe as well as the U.K., trying to continue to strengthen security support in the Indo-Pacific region. Look for security to be front and center between President Biden and the Japanese Prime Minister.
Yahoo Finance contributor Kevin Cirilli. Kevin, good to see you this morning. Thanks for breaking that all down.